51% of organizations rely on public AI tools such as ChatGPT and Copilot, while only 20% report enterprise-wide AI deployments built on governed frameworks. My name is Paul Nashawaty. I'm the practice lead and principal analyst for the application development and monetization practice. And today we're here talking to someone who's focused on data strategy and enterprise AI, someone who deals with their day-to-day and gaps between AI ambitions and AI reality. So Sue Laine, Chief Data Technologist at Quest Software. She's got the front row seat to how enterprises are navigating to the hardest part of this transition. Sue, welcome to the podcast. How are you doing today?
Thank you. Nice to be here. Doing well, thanks.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, why don't you introduce yourself and introduce Quest?
All right. So yes, my name is Susan Laine, but you can call me Sue, and I'm the global field CTO here at Quest Software. And Quest Software is a company that works with understanding data from a data management perspective, as well as database perspective. So we've had some longtime technologies that you've maybe heard of in the industry, like Toad and Foglight and Irwin. But I'm here to talk mainly about the data space and where we are with helping folks become more ready with their data for AI.
Yeah, Sue, it's really great to have you on because it's a hot topic. People are trying to figure out what's going on in the market. They're trying to figure out how to move and mature their initiatives. But here's what's happening in the market right now. We see that over 80% of mid-market and enterprises, the organizations have launched plans or plan to launch AI and ML initiatives over the next 12 to 18 months, with 62% are citing AI as a strategic priority. That staggering level of commitment is there. But there's also this commitment and capacity are two very different things, right? We see that when you look at where enterprises actually are versus where they want to be, the picture gets really complicated fast, right? And the governance gap is real, and it's really widening, and it's a problem. So the opening stat I led with, about half organizations are running public tools like ChatGPT and Copilot. Well, fewer than a quarter of them have governed enterprise frameworks in place. It's not just a maturity gap, that's a risk posture. So Sue, I think there's a lot going on here, right? And when we look at that, governance gap is a real AI bottleneck, right? We see that most enterprises, they're having these AI projects running, but far fewer are governing the structure and controls. So from where you sit at Quest, what does the governance gap actually look like in practice for enterprises that you're working with?
Yeah. If you had asked me that question, Paul, a year ago, I would have said that it's not so bad and that folks are really rallying to get behind AI and ensure that it's safe and that it's well governed and that sort of thing. But these days, it's actually getting a little bit more scary with having these agentic capabilities that are out there today, because there's so many data issues that right now are caught by the human eye. And when you think about that, when you think about your busy BI and business intelligence arena, when you're looking at reports and you're coming across with data discrepancies and data issues, you're going to talk about it, right? You're going to go to somebody else in your group who probably has the same definition of what revenue is, and you're going to solve those discrepancies in those reports as they come along. But now with the agentic capabilities, these data discrepancies, they're going to scale faster and further than ever before. And the consumer of the data has actually changed. Obviously, a human, can run a handful of queries a day, and they can absorb that at a slower rate because you're working through your judgment and you're having conversations. An agent issues like so many orders of magnitude more requests, and they don't have to apply this human judgment or have a conversation. So these seem like probably small discrepancies, but I live in the state of Florida right now, and Florida just announced just this week that they're filing a lawsuit against OpenAI. Because AI and Sam Altman is prioritizing commercial gain over public safety. And there's been some campus shootings where the human consulted ChatGPT for the planning of those attacks and the weapons and the timing and the locations, etc. So that's where I'm saying, it's getting a little bit scary out there. with what AI
Yeah,
capabilities
that's
are and how much safety we have or have not around them.
absolutely, that's super scary. That's not something we want really to have happen. I mean, AI, there's, of course, when we look at AI and where it's going in organizations, there's, the positive sides of it, right? The productivity gains, the accessibility, there's growth, there's all sorts of things that can happen that's very positive. And of course, we know that there's bad actors out there, right? And bad actors are going to use AI to monopolize their time, to use the tools to fit their objectives as well. So those things kind of have to be aware as well. But let's bring it back to data readiness. It is a hidden AI blocker. Everyone's talking about these models and infrastructure, and the data foundation that's underneath the models is often shaky, right? So when I'm talking to organizations, we're often talking about, okay, well, you can build these front end systems, you can build these systems of engagement, you can access this information, but the data underneath isn't ready for these AI systems. So you can't govern what you can't trace, right? And part of this is you can't trust a model that's trained on data you don't fully understand. This is going back to your point there, Sue. But this is a foundational issue that tends to get glossed over and often in a rush to deploy. So we see in our last year's research that 25% of IT budgets were spent on AI projects. And it was just a big push to use AI projects without really knowing what those AI projects were doing. And there was really no measurement of ROI as well. So Sue, when we're looking at advising enterprise on AI readiness, how often does data quality and data foundation come up as an actual problem, and are they even thinking about this in ways that they as part of their AI initiatives?
Right. So that's a great question. And I come at it from a vendor perspective with data management tooling. So I force those conversations, obviously, but the trouble that we have is that we're really pigeonholed into talking to the data management folks and the data governance side of the house. And rarely do we get an audience with a center of excellence that's concerned or wants to even talk about tooling around data governance, around assurance, etc. So I was at a recent Gartner conference where they asked the question in the room, how many of you know who's responsible for AI within your organization? And there's thousands of people in here and maybe 10 people raise their hand. So finding who's responsible for AI within the organization and understanding, who's responsible for really getting it right within the organization, what team is really challenging for us.
Yeah, it makes sense. I mean, it's interesting kind of perspective you just put out there. Understanding who owns the quote AI in the organization is an interesting perspective, because in my view, AI is a tool and it's an enabler to be successful for organizations, right? And operational AI is really where enterprise really getting hit hard, right? They're not really understanding how AI models into production is one thing, right? They're vibe coding, they're building these applications, they're trying these new things. Innovation is like a big theme of 2025. Implementation is a big push in 2026. Our research shows that 28% of practitioners report that production AI models require daily retraining, compared to approximately 14% of managers, and over 80% of practitioners are retraining models quarterly or more. So there's a lot of training that's going on, and that's part of understanding where the data lives. But the practitioner lives in this reality is very different view of AI operations than the managers tracking the outcomes, right? So there's KPIs, and then there's how it's being used. It's pretty much to your point, how is it being used and where is it being done. So Sue, when we look at this, what does the day-to-day reality between running AI and production actually look like? And where do you think that why is there such a disconnect between practitioners' experience and the leadership that's perceiving this experience?
Yeah, we see a lot of AI projects really get off to a great start where they build in the intent of the model, they build in some of the business requirements and data products that are well governed into those AI projects. And in the testing and the validation stages, everything's going really, really well. But the minute they put it into production, that's when things start to go awry, because they're using the production data that's out there right now. And I always say that AI is going to find those dirty socks underneath the bed quite easily. It's going to go after everything if you're not careful, especially around context. And I think the big disconnect is really in adoption. So there's this thing, called right now the AI adoption gap, where AI is advancing much faster and becoming much more mature than our capacity to keep up with it from an adoption perspective. And so there's a gap there. And that gap, in that gap that we're trying to fill is the trust in the data, so that you don't have to put so much risk involved in that new development of that AI model. So you hear a lot about data trust, and for me to really make it real, it's in solving this adoption gap. Because if you have trust, if you have visibility, if you have a good control layer or good control plane around your data, you're going to be able to go faster, and you're going to have the results match more of what's happening in your testing and in your validation phases when it goes into production. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. I think the other thing to take into consideration is how AI projects scale. So scaling AI, it really does require training infrastructure as a strategic asset, right? And
Yes.
like the numbers around the operational drag are really impressive, at least from what I'm seeing in our research. We see that 44% of AI teams lose 1 to 2 weeks per project annually to compute efficiency challenges, right? While 28% lose 2 to 4 weeks, and 6% lose more than 2 months. So there's a lot of data there to kind of think through. I'm happy to share that with the audience if they want to look at that in more detail. But there's a lot of data. Basically, the point here is it's not a tooling problem, it's a strategic problem, right? And
Yes.
the organizations are treating AI infrastructure as an afterthought, but they pay for it directly in the velocity and the cost, right? So when we look at this, when enterprises are hitting those scaling walls, what are the infrastructure and data architecture decisions that really make for a big difference here? Because it's a big problem.
Yeah, there's two things that I really want to point out. One is around context, and the other is around reusability. So from a context perspective, you hear a lot about semantic layers. You hear a lot about context and how it's going to make your AI more efficient and give more exact, precise answers. The more context and the more semantics that you're using, the better the answers are, right? So think about it from a cost perspective and a token perspective. And there was a study that was done around this. How many tokens does it take without a semantic layer versus with a semantic layer? And I like to break it down into a real use case scenario, like what is our most profitable customer segment? So you need to know, you need to understand the table descriptions around what is a customer. You need to understand what segments you're going after for that customer, and that there are different segments. You have to have extensive instructions around what is how do you define profitability within the organization. And then there's data quality caveats built into that. And the study came out with it's taking 5,000 to 15,000 tokens if you're going to have 3 or 4 attempts at that response. With a semantic layer, you have the metrics for net profit margin, what it actually is. You have a dimension maybe called a customer segment. You have a source of you're going after your most trusted data with a high trust score, and you can get that down to 1 or 2 average attempts and save about 500 to 2,000 tokens in that response. And when you calculate that with the amount of prompts that you have in a day, the numbers can really skyrocket for the number of tokens that you can eliminate by having really good, strong context around that data. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's a really good point. Actually, I was in a conversation recently, and I thought that this was an interesting stat that the management KPI was directly related to how the employees were using how many tokens they were generating. So it was how much money is it costing the company? That's how much That was the KPI that they were using. I thought that was kind of an interesting one. It didn't make a lot of sense to me because it's more about results than just usage, right? I think part of it is trying to get the employees to use it, right?
Yep, 100%.
But they also go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead. I was going to go into part two, but if you want to stay on context, that's cool.
Yeah, no, I was going to kind of pivot over to governance, but I think that makes a lot of sense here. When we start looking at the citizen developers, the lines of businesses, they're the ones that are creating and vibe coding and developing applications at their lines, right, of business. And without this AI governance frameworks, it really needs to be built for change, not just compliance, right? So governance frameworks are really built purely around today's regulatory requirements, but they tend to be really brittle, right? And that's a problem. And when we don't account for this model evolution, these new data sources, agentic behavior, like you were talking about, Sue, well, the speed at which AI capacities or capabilities are changing, the top AI operational pain points are really interesting because our research has shown reliability is 33% operational complexity. And at 31% compliance and 15% is really directly related to compliance as well. So when we look at that, reliability, operational complexity, and compliance is really the three main areas. But compliance is real, right? And it's actually ranked third in pain, but not first. So how do you think that building and governance frameworks here, Sue, is durable enough to help, to hold up as AI capacities and capabilities and regulatory environments keep shifting, right? We see the new EU CRA going into effect. We see the constant executive orders going into effect, the niche things that are going into effect. These are all kind of challenges. What are your thoughts here?
Yeah, so honestly, our clients that have been managing data for a long time and concerned with governance and compliance, like the big banks and insurance companies, those industries are way ahead of the game, definitely, sure, because they've built that solid foundation and they have risk assessments on a regular basis. And where they are today is using AI for AI now. So they knew they needed to scale that. They needed to be much faster with it. So let's just take one of our biggest customer from a data modeling and logical modeling perspective is JP Morgan Chase. They have over 31,000 data models, and you cannot put anything into production unless it's been modeled first. But they came to us and they said, this doesn't scale for us anymore. This isn't fast enough. And people are skipping the data modeling, they're skipping the metadata, they're skipping the governance. They're using ChatGPT to do this now and just doing it all on the fly. So one of the things that the vendors and the clients are doing is they're starting to use AI for AI, is what I call it. So in order to scale faster and quicker, they're embedding these capabilities using AI and serving up a use case, like let's say creating a data product by quickly creating a data spec. By instead of doing this whole large enterprise data modeling exercise, they're using AI to quickly create what is the logical definition of this new data product that I'm about to create. And then they're using AI to understand where's the best data that I can use and pull from for this new data product. And then they're wrapping that control plane around that particular data product so that they always know, when I use this data product, I need to be aware of these regulatory requirements, and these gotchas are actually around the data and the usage, and they're tagging critical data elements using AI, etc. So the vendors are quickly pivoting and reimagining the data management space as well, along with the customers at this point.
Yeah, definitely change is definitely happening, and it's happening very fast. But hey, Sue, before we wrap up, there's a lot that we talked about here. The audience might be interested in figuring out more about what's going on with Quest. Where should the audience go to learn more about Quest software?
The best place is quest.com. We do a lot with that platform, and you can see a lot of videos and enablement and best practices and things like that. And also Quest on LinkedIn. has a lot of great insights and modern insights as to what's going on with AI and data.
Excellent, Sue. Well, hey, thank you for being on today. Thanks for joining us. It's really been a great conversation. Super interesting because it's very relevant, very top of mind for many organizations. Thank you.
Appreciate it. Thank you, Paul.
Yeah, and a big thank you to all of you who've tuned in. We do appreciate you being part of the AppDevANGLE community. But for now, that wraps up this episode. And we'll be back next Wednesday with another conversation diving into the tools, trends, and talent shaping the future of application development. So whether you're deploying at the edge, building with AI, or modernizing your cloud stack, we've got you covered. Be sure to follow us on social if you have any thoughts, questions, or just want to connect. Until next time, stay curious and stay building.